Team X, following Kaya's directions, arrived at the emergency entrance of Meteorological Hill, where the president's last known coordinates were located. Upon seeing this, Doc couldn't help but grumble.
During a nuclear war, the entire U.S. government gets relocated to a secure underground facility. The rest of us get blown to smithereens.
As they continued forward, they spotted several vehicles parked ahead, likely used by the president during his retreat. They began to inspect each vehicle. Roberta's luck turned sour when, upon opening the car door, a zombie leaped out at her. Fortunately, 10K's quick reflexes allowed him to draw his pistol and take it down in the nick of time. Then, they found a corpse inside one of the vehicles, which bore a striking resemblance to the president. It was only when Roberta removed the badge from his chest that they realized he was just a minor minister. Then, they arrived in front of a thick steel door. Roberta inserted the recently acquired ID card, but the steel door remained unresponsive. Lily noticed that the steel door required retinal verification. Upon hearing this, Doc had an epiphany and returned to the minister's corpse, then proceeded to scoop out his eyeball with a teaspoon in a scene of unintended beauty. Doc, holding the minister's eyeball, ran back to the steel door for verification, but the door still did not respond. As it turned out, a layer of cataract on the eyeball was obstructing the scan. After removing the cataract and attempting verification again, the door finally opened, and the team prepared to enter. They quickly found the congressional meeting room, where the president was likely to be. Upon opening the door, Roberta discovered that all the officials inside had mutated and there was no sign of the president, so she instructed 10K and Lily to search elsewhere, while Murphy and Doc dealt with the zombies. Murphy and Doc were quite thrilled by the task.
This is my team.
That's no way to treat it.
After dealing with the situation, they regrouped to continue their search for the president but were suddenly confronted by two armed Homeland Security agents demanding their identities. Roberta responded by revealing her pre-apocalypse role as a lieutenant in the Department of Defense and her current mission to save humanity. Insisting on meeting the president, the agents chuckled, remarking on the irony of making such a statement 8 years into the apocalypse. Then, a woman emerged, inquiring about the commotion. Hearing the agents refer to her as the president, Murphy was visibly skeptical. The woman turned around, displaying the presidential seal, revealing herself as the 234th president. During the conversation, Roberta and her team learned that only the woman and two agents were left at the base, with everyone else having departed for New America. Had Roberta arrived just a day later, they too would have evacuated the place. Roberta then straightforwardly asked President Jane for her thumbprint to gain authorization to launch nuclear weapons. Jane shakes her head and removes her gloves, only to see that Jane's thumb has been cut off and her other hand has not been spared.
Ew.
A few days prior, a man had knocked out her bodyguards and forcibly removed Jane's fingers. Jane then led Roberta and her team into the office, explaining not to be too disappointed, as since the zombie virus outbreak, the presidential election had been nominal, with no real transfer of power or change in nuclear codes, meaning control still lay with the president before the outbreak. Before becoming president, she was merely an assistant, so the person they were seeking wasn't her.
You know, without them, this is starting to feel like a suicide mission.
Yeah, we have to try. It's the only way to access Black Rainbow.
Did you say Black Rainbow?
When Roberta mentioned Black Rainbow, Jane immediately asked if Teller had sent them, leaving everyone puzzled. Jane then pulls out a videotape about Black Rainbow. It turned out, Black Rainbow was a biological weapon developed by Americans during the Cold War to prevent defeat in a nuclear war against the Soviet Union. Because the Soviet Union was so large at the time, it was difficult for them to carry out an all-out attack without any dead ends. To safeguard American interests, even if the United States no longer existed, the Black Rainbow Project could be initiated, utilizing drones that operated automatically to cultivate flesh-eating bacteria and necrotizing fasciitis bacteria in the clouds, and then releasing them with the rain onto the ground. The plan aimed to eliminate all survivors, thus preserving American dignity and interests. After watching the video, everyone was so shocked that they were at a loss for words. Jane then revealed that the president they were looking for was on the 25th level underground, a place already overrun by zombies. Hearing this, Murphy considered it a suicide mission and urged Roberta to reconsider, but she was undaunted. Seeing their unwavering determination, Jane decided to personally lead them down to find the president.
Call me Jane. Follow me.
Then, they entered an elevator.
Level Z, please.
As the elevator reached level Z, everyone drew their weapons, ready for combat at any moment. Ironically, the elevator doors opened behind them. Luckily, their quick reaction saved them from being potentially trapped and perishing inside the elevator. They fought their way out with all their might, but Roberta wasn't quick enough and was pinned by several zombies inside the elevator, which then closed again. Meanwhile, 10K and the others managed to escape into a room, shutting the zombies out at the last moment. Jane mentioned that there were probably 200 people on this level, which left everyone baffled. It was then Lily realized that Roberta was missing. At this moment, Roberta took the elevator again, and as the doors opened, she cautiously stepped out. This level was devoid of the fierce zombies but was instead filled with various pieces of equipment. On the other side, Murphy and the others felt helpless, trapped in the room. Suddenly, Doc spotted a suit that might belong to the president they were seeking and tossed it to Murphy. Murphy, puzzled by why he was given the suit, heard Doc suggest that since he could sense zombies, maybe he could try locating by scent. Murphy protested, saying he wasn't a military dog, but everyone thought it was worth a try. With no other choice, Murphy tried and, surprisingly, made a discovery.
Did you get anything?
Yeah. I mean, the feeling that the president needs a stronger deodorant. And we need a better plan than me sniffing a jacket.
If you two are through, I might have a plan.
Jane's suggested method was to lure zombies in one by one for identification. Quick as a flash, Doc grabbed a zombie and shut the door rapidly. Then 10K controlled the zombie, and if it wasn't the president they were seeking, Lily would take it down with a knife. Thus, they cooperated in searching for the zombie president, and soon, a pile of bodies accumulated.
I think it's him.
Through their efforts, the zombie president was finally found, and they all pressed down on him. In no time, the zombie president was tightly bound, but upon closer inspection by Jane, it turned out they had the wrong person. Upon hearing this, everyone broke down in frustration. Meanwhile, Roberta accidentally entered a meeting room with a teleprompter displaying soothing messages to the public, claiming the zombie virus had been completely eradicated. Roberta found this absurd. Just then, she heard the growl of zombies and followed the sound. Behind a curtain, she discovered a tied-up zombie. Roberta recognized at a glance that this zombie was the president they had been desperately seeking. The scene shifted back to Murphy and the others, who had eliminated countless zombies but hadn't found a trace of the president. Murphy resumed his chatterbox mode. Doc admitted the plan was terrible, but it was the only option. As he prepared to lure another zombie, they heard a creaking noise from outside. Curious, Doc opened the door, and it turned out Roberta had timely returned. Then, Roberta pushed the zombie in front of Jane. Finally, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. However, as they took the elevator back to the surface, Roberta thanked Jane for her efforts to stop Black Rainbow. The next second, the agents aimed their guns at Roberta and her team. Jane's goal was to launch the Black Rainbow weapon, and she had assumed Roberta and her team had the same intention, which is why she had helped them. Suddenly, Lily, standing at the back, drew her gun unnoticed. Jane commanded Lily to turn the gun around. At this moment, Lily hesitated, recalling the oath taken before becoming an American soldier to always be loyal to the president. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Lily still aimed her gun at Roberta and her team. Then, they were taken to the office. Jane finally revealed the truth. She had already joined Zona, and the government officials who had supposedly gone to New America had actually gone to Zona. The government and Zona have reached an agreement to use the Black Rainbow program to kill all the zombies and survivors out there. And then the officials and powerful people will reproduce the next generation together. This was the so-called reset plan. Under everyone's astonished gaze, Jane ordered Roberta and her team to be eliminated. At that moment, Lily turned the gun around and shot Jane on the spot, while 10K and Doc made the two agents shoot each other. With everyone's cooperation, the 234th president was overthrown. Afterward, they immediately headed to the nuclear launch facility. Unfortunately, Jane and the two agents turned into undead zombies. As usual, the team retreated with 10K and Lily covering. Then, the zombies chased after them, with 10K and Lily unleashing their full firepower, frantically blasting away at the zombies. I have to say that the weapons used by the agents are still quite fierce. Not long after, the two agents were beaten into a puddle of flesh. Then, Jane charged at them, and Roberta, holding a flagpole, went forward alone to fight Jane. During the fight, Roberta fell into a hallucination again. This time, a light tower appeared in front of her, casting a light on the ground that formed a ring of fire. It seemed to be giving Roberta some kind of clue. Snapping back to reality, Roberta began to clear the zombies, and with just a few moves, she smashed Jane's head into a pulp.
Give her a minute.
Then, everyone hurried to the surface, as Black Rainbow was about to launch, and they had to act fast.
If anybody asks,
We're nowhere near Mount Weather.